Very Satisfactory Films. Born Montenegrin, the Montenegro of Nero Wolfe's youth.
My name is Nero Wolfe. It is not my birth name. It is the name I chose to use when I decided to move to New York City and make my living as a private detective. My name may be familiar to you. It has been mentioned in the newspapers regarding my orchid collection. And my confidential assistant, Archie Goodwin, has published reports of several of my investigations. One report was a case that took us to Montenegro, the Black Mountain. Mr. Goodwin is aware that I was born in Montenegro. He knows very little about my life there. I rarely mention my family or childhood experiences, and our visit there did not lend itself to reminiscing. The Montenegro of today is very different from the Montenegro of my youth. This is my story of Montenegro. I last traveled to Montenegro under unusual circumstances, and I arrived by sea under the cover of night. The darkness hid from view the brilliant blue of the placid Adriatic Sea and the seemingly endless wave of mountains covered with black pines and crowned with limestone peaks. My Montenegro was a nation of warriors. For 500 years, brave, spirited, and defiant Montenegrins fought and died for independence and freedom. Self-defense was all Montenegrins had ever known. Yet, it was not for fertile fields that Montenegrins fought, but for barren mountains. Cities were in ruins, homes razed, forests and fields burned, and pastures stripped. Travel was difficult. Horse-drawn carts were of limited use in the mountains. Mules had a surer footing on the narrow paths that hugged the side of cliffs. When mules couldn't, women carried the burden. Peace came in 1878. The Montenegrin-Ottoman War ended, and a victorious Montenegro gained independence and virtually doubled in size. This peace allowed Prince Nikola to advance social reforms in education, post and telegraph offices, and a network of roads and railways. The cost of independence came high. Everyone was poor. Hunger was prevalent. Montenegrins lived below the subsistence level. Montenegro, 1893. I was born in 1893 in a remote village west of Podgorica, 2 miles from the Albanian border. It was the custom for a woman to give birth alone in a field. My mother carried me home in her apron and returned to her work. I was baptized in the Orthodox Christian Church. Montenegrins in general were not religious. My upbringing was more aligned with Stoicism than Christianity. My father was a striking figure, tall and powerfully built, with dark hair and eyes, and a large mustache and cleanly shaven chin. He was proud of his good looks and took great care to dress well. He wore a red jacket, embroidered with gold, silk, and wide-cut blue knee breeches. Over this he wore a long, heavily embellished coat tied tightly at the waist with a sash of brilliant colors. Around his waist he wore a leather belt designed to hold his weapons, a knife, a revolver, and a yatagan, a short curved sword. He carried a rifle when venturing close to the Albanian border. He smoked incessantly, gambled occasionally, and drank rakia, a strong plum brandy, at weddings and on holidays. My mother was a plain woman, short and thick-set, with a weather-beaten complexion. The youthful beauty of a Montenegrin woman rarely survives a life of back-breaking work and deprivation. Her clothes were less colorful and embellished than my father's. She wore a long white dress under an embroidered bodice and woolen skirt. A long sleeveless coat was held closed with a decorative metallic belt. A wide belt and apron held her knife and revolver. My clothes were similar to those my father wore. At the age of 10, I carried a knife in my belt, and when I was older, a revolver at all times. We lived in a 2-story house built against the side of a cliff. It was made of stone without mortar, and the roof was tiled. The first floor was a single room that functioned as kitchen, bedroom, and family room. The fireplace had a raised hearth, and a cauldron hung from a ring above. There was no chimney. We ate unleavened bread, cheese, eggs, fruit, vegetables, and drank coffee and kefir. We seldom ate fish. Meat might be eaten once or twice a year, when a wedding or a holiday was celebrated with roasted lamb. We raised goats for their milk and sold their meat, hair, and skins. I was taught at an early age how to goat herd. The rocky terrain was nearly barren of scrubs and bushes, and the goats would spread out in search of an area that hadn't been overgrazed. A goat that wandered across the border to Albania was lost to the herd. The closer I ventured to the border, the greater the risk I had of being killed. Should that have occurred, my family would be honor-bound to avenge my death, and the subsequent retaliation would result in the loss of several lives on each side of the border. I was an active child, healthy and strong. I enjoyed playing ball, climbing, exploring caves, hunting dragonflies, and fishing. I was 9 years old the first time I climbed the Black Mountain. My father taught me how to use a pistol, and I used rocks for target practice. Orchids grew in the wild, sometimes covering a field with purple flowers. These odd flowers intrigue me to this very day. I quickly outgrew my childish attachment to my mother. I was being groomed for war and taught to despise the weaker sex. Women were considered inferior and did most of the heavy work. I attended school from the age of 7 through 15. I studied Serbian language and literature, Russian language, geography, history, mathematics, physics, and philosophy. It was impossible to indulge my love of reading. Few books had survived the wars. I was still a boy when I left Montenegro and began traveling. It is said that all Montenegrins eventually return to the Black Mountain. I cannot. My future is here.